Joining me now to discuss this and all of the day's top stories live from Darwin is Sky News Darwin Bureau Chief Matt Cunningham. Matt, why do you think that two former Prime Ministers here in Keating and in Turnbull have felt the need to intervene on this $368 billion deal?
Well, I think there are probably different reasons for each of them. When it comes to Paul Keating, I think he's always been a strong supporter of a closer relationship with China. That was certainly the case when he was Prime Minister, and it remains the case now. But Tim Watts there makes the good point that times have certainly changed a lot since Paul Keating was Prime Minister. I thought Keating's comments about Penny Wong in particular were a bit over the top. It was a real personal attack that he made against her, and they've come back to bite him today. And we've even seen Anthony Albanese say today that the person really who's had the most damage done to them by the comments that Paul Keating made was Paul Keating himself. I think he's right about that. When it comes to Malcolm Turnbull's criticism, I think Malcolm Turnbull's trying to protect his own legacy. He's trying to protect his government's decision to do that deal, to sign that deal with the French over the submarine contract that most independent analysts said really was not the deal that was in Australia's best interests. And I think you've heard most of the sensible commentary since then talk about the need for nuclear submarines, talk about the need for a closer relationship with the UK and the US, and that's what we're seeing happen under AUKUS.
It's interesting because, of course, both of them had quite a bit of vitriol when they spoke about, in Turnbull's case, Scott Morrison. He called him reckless, and Keating pretty much said that Anthony Albanese was incompetent. But they both did raise a valid point in that there has been no debate or discussion. Not even the Labor Party had a discussion about this deal that will cost Australia at least $368 billion. Some of the points Keating made seem to be quite valid, not being a submarine expert, but, he said the size of the submarines are so bulky they would be discoverable from space. He said they're not suitable for Australia's shallow waters off our coast, and that it's just going to have a conventional weapon system. It's not a nuclear weapon system. So, aren't these valid points that potentially we should be discussing? And the only people who perhaps had the courage to raise any criticisms are former Prime Ministers.
Well, $368 billion is certainly an eye-watering amount of money, and I guess you're right to say that there should be certainly a debate, a discussion and an analysis of that decision if we are committing to a project of that size and that cost. And there are a lot of questions about, whether by the time, these submarines are built, they're still going to be fit for purpose. It's a difficult debate, it's a difficult situation. But at the same time, I think the deal that we were signing up to with the French to build those submarines was not going to put us in a good position. Under this deal, we are going to have some of those submarines, albeit second-hand submarines, sooner, so our capability will be there earlier. And I think that given the place that the global climate's in at the moment, particularly in our region, I think we really do need to be more closely aligned with the United States.
Yeah. Now, attention is turning to how this would be funded. The cost of the NDIS is growing. It's rising $75 million per month. This is one area that has been raised, and the government may look to make changes to the scheme, including reviewing support for children with autism. Matt, do you think the NDIS, do you think this should be the first area to face cuts in order to pay for the nuclear-powered submarines?
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because it is an important program, the NDIS, and for any family who has a child with a disability, they would say that the NDIS is crucial. And if you weigh it up simply on should we spend $368 billion, on a submarine program versus, should we, fund some of the most vulnerable people in our society, then, you'd say it's a no-brainer. You wouldn't cut money out of the NDIS. But I do think there are issues with the ballooning cost of the NDIS. We're talking about a program that by 2026 is going to cost taxpayers more than $50 billion. And so I do think we need to have a look at the NDIS, how it's working, where that money's going. There was a story in News Corp papers only a few days ago, saying that NDIS participants and their families, were able to use that funding to spend up to $15,000 on a holiday on the Gold Coast. I don't think most people would think that is really where the money under the NDIS should be going. So, I mean, it's a difficult, to just compare one to the other, but I do think that we do need to look at NDIS and how it's working at the moment.